The rain wasn't just falling. It was drumming a frantic, heavy rhythm against the roof of the old sedan. Inside the car, 17-year-old Maya gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had turned a pale white. She was tired, the kind of deep-bone tired that comes from a long day of classes followed by a 4-hour shift. Volunteering at the community center. Her wipers were working overtime, smearing the water across the windshield in a futile attempt to clear the view. But the world outside was just a blur of red taillights and gray mist. It was a Tuesday evening, usually a time when the town was quiet, people already home in their warm living rooms, watching television or eating dinner. Maya just wanted to get home, take a hot shower, and sleep. She hummed softly to herself to drown out the sound of the storm, a nervous habit she had picked up recently. She was a careful driver, perhaps too careful for her age. Her friends often teased her for driving like a grandmother, always stopping a little too long at stop signs and checking her mirrors 3 times before changing lanes. Tonight, that caution felt like a safety blanket. She approached the intersection of Oak Street and 4th Avenue. It was a 4-way stop, usually well lit, but the storm seemed to dim the street lamps. As she neared the white line, she eased her foot off the gas. The light ahead was green for her, a familiar fuzzy circle in the distance. She checked her mirrors again to clear. She looked left, then right. Everything seemed normal. Maya entered the intersection. The tires of her car rolled over the slick pavement. She remembered thinking that she needed to stop at the grocery store the next day to buy milk. It was a mundane thought, the kind that occupies your brain when you feel safe. But that feeling of safety shattered in a split second. From the left, out of the darkness and the rain, came a pair of blindingly bright headlights. They were moving far too fast for the weather conditions. Maya didn't even have time to scream. Her foot slammed onto the brake pedal out of instinct, but on the wet road, it did nothing but lock up the wheels. There was a screech of rubber fighting for grip, sound that tore through the noise of the rain. And then impact. The crash wasn't like in the movies where everything goes silent. It was loud, a terrifying crunch of metal folding into metal, and glass shattering into a million diamonds. The force of the collision was immense. Maya's car was spun around violently, pushed sideways, as if it were a toy made of plastic. The airbags deployed with a sharp bang, filling the car with the smell of dust and chemicals. Her head snapped to the side, hitting the window frame. Everything went black for a moment. When Maya opened her eyes again, the world was spinning. The car had stopped moving, but the rain was still hammering down, now leaking in through the shattered windshield. Her left arm throbbed with a sharp, intense pain, and her head felt like it had been split open. She could taste blood in her mouth. Panic set in, cold and sharp. She tried to move her legs, terrified they were trapped, but they seemed to work, even though they felt heavy. She sat there, gasping for air. Her heart racing so fast, she thought it might burst out of her chest. Outside, the sound of running feet approached. A neighbor who had heard the crash from his living room was yelling into a phone, calling 911. He shone a flashlight into Maya's car. "Hey, can you hear me? Don't move." The man shouted, his voice trembling. Maya tried to answer, but her voice was just a whisper. "I'm okay," she managed to choke out. Though she wasn't sure if it was true, across the intersection, another car was stopped. It was a large black SUV, expensive and shiny even through the rain. The front of it was crumpled, steam rising from the hood. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. He didn't look like he was in pain. He didn't look panicked. He looked angry. Maya watched through the haze of her shock as the man, wearing a tailored suit that looked completely out of place in the rainstorm, checked his own car for scratches. He ran a hand over his jacket, brushing off some glass, and then walked toward Maya's vehicle. His face was red, his brow furrowed. He didn't ask if she was alive. He didn't ask if she was hurt. "Are you crazy?" he yelled, his voice cutting through the sound of the sirens that were just beginning to wail in the distance. "You blew that light. I had the right of way." Maya stared at him, confused. Her head was swimming, making it hard to think straight. She remembered the green light. She was sure of it. She remembered checking before she moved. She tried to shake her head, but the movement made her dizzy. "No," she whispered, tears mixing with the rain on her face. It was green. The man scoffed, a dismissive sound that made Maya feel small. Yeah, right. A kid driving a beat-up car trying to beat the light, he muttered, pulling out his own phone to make a call. He spoke loudly, making sure everyone around could hear. Yes, I've been in an accident. A teenager ran a red light. Totaled my car. I'm fine, but she needs to learn how to drive. The neighbor with the flashlight turned to look at the man, his expression skeptical. I didn't see the light, the neighbor said cautiously. But you were going pretty fast, mister. The man shot the neighbor a cold glare. I was driving safely for the conditions. She came out of nowhere. Within minutes, the street was filled with flashing red and blue lights. Police officers arrived, securing the scene. An ambulance pulled up right behind Maya's car. Paramedics carefully opened the door, placing a brace around her neck to be safe. We're going to take good care of you. Sweetie, one of the paramedics said gently as they lifted her onto a stretcher, as they wheeled her toward the ambulance. Maya twisted her head to look back. She saw the man in the suit talking to a police officer. He was gesturing wildly, pointing at her car, then at the traffic light hanging above the intersection. He looked confident. He looked like he owned the road. Maya wanted to scream, to tell the officer that he was lying, that she was careful, that she would never run a red light. But the pain in her head was getting worse, and the bright lights were making her nauseous. She closed her eyes, surrendering to the darkness that was creeping back into the edges of her vision. She woke up hours later in the emergency room. The bright fluorescent lights hummed above her. Her mother was sitting by the bedside, holding her good hand, her eyes puffy from crying. Her father was pacing the small room, looking worried and angry. Mom, Maya croaked. Her mother squeezed her hand. Oh, thank God you're awake. You have a concussion, sweetie, and a broken arm. But you're going to be okay? My car? Maya asked, feeling a lump in her throat. Totaled, her father said, his voice low. But that doesn't matter. We're just glad you're alive. Maya lay back against the pillow, the events of the night playing in her mind like a bad movie she couldn't turn off. She saw the headlights. She heard the man's voice blaming her. She felt the injustice of it deep in her gut. She wasn't perfect, but she followed the rules. She was a good kid. She didn't speed. She didn't run lights. Police officer left a report for us, her mother said softly, reading from a crumpled piece of paper on the tray table. The other driver. He told them the light was red for you? Since there were no cameras at the intersection, and you were, well, a bit confused when they found you, the report is leaning towards his statement. Maya felt a tear roll down her cheek. It wasn't fair. The system was supposed to protect people, but right now, felt like it was protecting the man in the suit because he was an adult and she was just a teenager with a broken car. She looked at her parents, who looked exhausted and stressed about the medical bills that were already piling up. She knew then that staying silent wasn't an option. She had to fight, even if her head hurt and she felt small. She had to make them believe her. But as she drifted back into a fitful sleep, she couldn't shake the feeling that the odds were stacked against her, and that this was just the beginning of a much longer, harder battle. The weeks following the accident were a blur of doctor's appointments, physical therapy sessions, and endless pain. Maya's arm was in a heavy cast, and her head still throbbed with a dull ache whenever she tried to focus for too long. But the physical pain was slowly becoming easier to handle than the knot of anxiety that had taken up permanent. Residence in her stomach. The man from the crash, whose name she learned was Mr. Sterling, hadn't just driven away. He was fighting back. Maya sat at the small kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of paper. Her parents sat across from her, looking weary. The medical bills were piling up, a mountain of debt that seemed to grow taller every single day. The insurance company had offered a settlement, but it was insulting. It was barely enough to cover the cost of her used car, let alone the hospital bills, the physical therapy, or the time she had to miss from school and her track team. It's not right, Maya said, her voice trembling slightly as she looked at the letter from the insurance company. He hit me. He was speeding. And now they are offering me nothing? Her father sighed, rubbing his temples. It's how these things work sometimes, Maya. Insurance companies want to pay out as little as possible. But his story is sticking. He's telling everyone you ran the light. Maya felt a surge of frustration. She remembered the green light clearly. She remembered stopping. She remembered the way Mr. Sterling had looked at her, not with concern but with annoyance. But in the eyes of the law and the insurance adjusters, it was her word against his. And he was a wealthy businessman with a fancy lawyer, while she was a teenager with a beat-up sedan and a concussion. That was when her parents made the decision. They couldn't accept the small offer. It wouldn't even scratch the surface of what they owed. They had to sue. They hired a lawyer, a man named Mr. Henderson, who seemed kind but serious. He explained that this wouldn't be easy. Without a video of the crash, it was going to be a battle of credibility. Preparing for the lawsuit was exhausting. Maya had to go over the details of the crash 100 times. She had to draw diagrams, answer endless questions, and relive the terrifying moment of impact over and over again. But the hardest part came when the legal process officially began: the depositions. A deposition is like a practice for court. But without a judge, it happens in a cold, sterile conference room with a bunch of lawyers and a court reporter typing every word you say. Maya walked into the room wearing her best-dressed clothes, feeling small and vulnerable. Mr. Sterling was already there. He looked confident, sitting comfortably in a leather chair, sipping coffee. He didn't even look at her when she walked in. The questioning started with easy things: her name, her age, her driving history. But quickly, Mr. Sterling's lawyer, a sharp-faced woman with glasses that seemed to pierce through Maya, turned the conversation to the night of the accident. "Maya," the lawyer began, her voice smooth but dangerous. "Isn't it true that it was raining very hard that night?" "Yes," Maya answered. "It was storming." "And isn't it true that you had just finished a long shift at the community center?" "You were tired, weren't you?" "I was a little tired, but I was fine to drive," Maya insisted. Gripping the arms of her chair, the lawyer raised an eyebrow. "Fine to drive? Or were you exhausted? Weren't you maybe in a hurry to get home? Maybe you were distracted? Maybe you just wanted to get out of the rain and didn't bother to look properly?" "I looked," Maya said, her voice rising. "I checked. The light was green." "Green," the lawyer repeated, as if testing the word. "Because you were driving a car that you admit had technical issues, correct? A faulty dash cam?" "It wasn't faulty. It didn't save the file," Maya stammered, feeling her face get hot. "So no video? No witnesses inside your car? Just you, tired and in a rush, claiming the light was green?" The lawyer pushed. "Meanwhile, my client, a respected member of the community with a perfect driving record, says it was red. Who should we believe?" The lawyer didn't stop there. She started bringing up Maya's life, things that had nothing to do with the crash. She asked about her grades, her friends, even the music she'd listened to in the car. She was trying to paint a picture of a typical, distracted teenager who didn't take driving seriously. Every time Maya tried to defend herself, the lawyer would twist her words. If Maya said she liked loud music, the lawyer wrote down distracted driver. God. If Maya admitted she was tired, the lawyer wrote down fatigued driver. God. Felt like she was drowning. Every time she looked at Mr. Sterling, he was shaking his head slightly, a look of pity on his face, as if he felt sorry for this troubled girl who was lying to get money from him. It made her blood boil, but she felt helpless. She was just a kid in a room full of adults who knew how to play the game. By the time the deposition ended, Maya felt drained. She walked out to the car where her mother was waiting and burst into tears. "They think I'm a liar," she sobbed. "They made it sound like I'm some kind of reckless kid." Her mother held her tight. "We know the truth, Maya. That's what matters." But as the court date approached, the atmosphere grew heavier. The news of the lawsuit had spread around town. Small towns love gossip, and this was a juicy story: the rich businessman versus the local high school girl. People started talking. Some people sided with Maya, but there were whispers too. People who knew Mr. Sterling, or who did business with him, started questioning Maya's story. "Did you hear she was texting?" She heard someone whisper in the grocery store line once. "Teenagers these days, always in a hurry," said another voice at a coffee shop. The rumors weren't true, but they were poison. Maya felt like she was walking around with a dark cloud over her head. She stopped going out with her friends. She spent her evenings helping her dad look for any piece of evidence they might have missed receipts. Anything from the night of the crash that could prove she was in the right lane, driving the right speed. But there was nothing. Finally, the day of the hearing arrived. The courtroom was nothing like on TV. It was smaller, dustier, and smelled like old paper and wood polish. Maya sat at a long table with Mr. Henderson. Her parents sat right behind her. On the other side of the room sat Mr. Sterling and his lawyer. Mr. Sterling looked calm, sipping water from a fancy bottle. The judge, an older man with silver hair and stern eyes, walked in. Everyone stood up. The judge sat down and looked over his glasses. "At the people in his courtroom are here today to determine if there is sufficient cause to proceed with this lawsuit regarding the traffic accident at the intersection of Oak Street and 4th Avenue, the judge said in a board. Voice stop. Mr. Henderson stood up. He did his best. He argued about the physics of the crash. He brought up the point of impact, saying that based on the position of the cars, Mr. Sterling must have been speeding. He showed photos of the damage. But when it was Mr. Sterling's lawyer's turn, she was ruthless. She stood up and walked toward the judge. "Your Honor," she began, "physics is open to interpretation, but character is not. We have a respected businessman, a pillar of this community who swears under oath that he had a green light. Against him, we have a young driver who admits she was tired, admits her equipment was faulty, and has no proof whatsoever." She turned and looked directly at Maya, her eyes cold. "Because there are no cameras and no independent witnesses, we are left with a choice. Do we believe the responsible adult with a clean record, or a teenager who wants someone to pay for a mistake she made?" Maya felt her heart sink. She wanted to stand up and scream, "I didn't make a mistake." But the judge didn't want to hear from her. He had read the depositions. He had read the police report where Mr. Sterling had already convinced the officer at the scene that it was Maya's fault. The judge sighed, closing the folder in front of him. In cases like this, without physical evidence like video footage or a neutral third-party witness, the court must rely on the credibility of the testimonies provided. Given the lack of contradictory evidence to Mr. Sterling's statement, and the lack of physical proof regarding the traffic light status, the judge paused. The silence in the room was deafening. Maya held her breath, praying for a miracle. "I find no sufficient cause to award damages based on the current evidence," the judge concluded. "The claim is dismissed." The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot. Dismissed. Maya sat frozen in her chair. It was over. She had lost. The law had looked at her, a young girl without money or power, chosen the man in the suit. Mr. Sterling stood up, smoothed his jacket, and gave a small, victorious nod to his lawyer. He didn't even glance at Maya as he walked out of the courtroom, leaving her with nothing but a broken arm, a stack of bills, and a crushing sense of injustice. The tears finally came, hot and stinging, as her parents put their arms around her, but the hug felt cold against the reality of what had just happened. The sound of the gavel banging against the wood block seemed to echo inside Maya's head long after the noise in the courtroom had faded. It was a sharp, final sound that felt like a door slamming shut, locking her away from any kind of justice. She sat frozen in the hard wooden chair, staring at the judge's empty bench. The air in the room felt heavy, thick with dust, and the smell of old paper. But mostly it smelled like defeat. Mr. Henderson, her lawyer, slowly gathered his papers into a neat pile. He didn't look at Maya. He seemed to be avoiding her eyes, shuffling documents just to have something to do with his hands. He cleared his throat quietly, a sad, awkward sound that broke the silence. "I am so sorry, Maya," he said softly. "I truly am. I know this isn't fair." Maya didn't answer. She couldn't find her voice. It felt like a heavy stone was sitting on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She watched as her father stood up. He didn't look angry anymore. He just looked old. His shoulders were slumped forward, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He reached out and squeezed Maya's good shoulder, his hand warm and trembling slightly. "Let's go home," he whispered. "There's nothing else we can do here." Across the aisle, Mr. Sterling was already standing. He didn't look like a man who had just been involved in a tragic accident. He looked like he had just finished a successful business meeting. He buttoned his expensive suit jacket, checking his reflection in the dark window of the courtroom. He leaned in to say something to his lawyer, and a low chuckle escaped his lips. It wasn't a loud laugh, but it cut through Maya's sadness like a knife. He was happy. He had one. As they walked out of the courtroom, Maya tried to keep her head down. She didn't want to see anyone. The hallway of the courthouse was busy, filled with people coming and going, talking in loud whispers about their own cases. But as Maya passed the benches near the door, she felt eyes on her. She looked up for a split second and saw Mr. Sterling leaning against the wall. He wasn't leaving yet. He was waiting for them to pass. He looked at Maya's parents, then his gaze shifted to Maya. A smug, arrogant smile spread across his face. It was the kind of smile that said, "Asterisk, I told you so. I have the power, and you have nothing." Asterisk, he gave a small, mocking nod, tipping his head toward her. It was a gesture of pure disrespect. Maya's mother stopped in her tracks. She turned toward the man, her eyes flashing with a rare, fierce anger. "You know what you did?" she said, her voice shaking, but loud enough for him to hear. "You know you ran that light? How do you sleep at night?" Mr. Sterling didn't even flinch. He just adjusted his cufflink and looked bored. "The law has spoken, Mrs. Niz. Whatever your name is," he said smoothly. "Maybe teach your daughter to drive next time." He turned and walked away, his shoes clicking crisply on the marble floor, without a backward glance. The ride home was the longest car ride of Maya's life. No one spoke. The rain had started again, streaking against the car windows in gray rivulets, blurring the outside world into a gray mess. Maya watched the streetlights flash by, each one illuminating her sad face in the glass for a brief second. She felt completely empty inside. All the fight had gone out of her. She felt small, not just because she was young, but because she felt like the truth didn't matter. If the truth didn't matter, what was the point of anything? When they got home, the house felt cold and quiet. Usually, this was a place of comfort, the smell of dinner cooking, the sound of the television in the background. But today, it felt like a tomb. Maya's father sat at the kitchen table, burying his face in his hands. Her mother went to the sink, staring out the window. Gripping the edge of the counter until her knuckles turned white, Maya retreated to her room. She didn't want to talk. She didn't want to be comforted with empty words like "it will be okay," because it wasn't okay. She lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling. Her cast itched, a constant reminder of the crash, and her head throbbed with a dull, rhythmic pain. She closed her eyes, but she couldn't sleep. Every time she drifted off, she saw the headlights. She heard the crunch of metal, and she saw Mr. Sterling's smug face laughing at her. Days passed, turning into a long gray week. Maya didn't go back to school right away. She couldn't face the questions. She knew the rumors would be flying. Everyone in town probably knew by now that the judge had thrown out the case. They would say she was lying. They would say she was just another kid looking for a payout. She spent most of her time sitting in her room, looking out the window at the backyard. The world outside kept moving, indifferent to her pain. The sun came out, the birds sang, people went to work. But Maya felt stuck in that moment in the courtroom. It's frozen in time. The financial reality started to sink in, too. Her parents stopped talking about it in front of her, just trying to protect her, but she heard the whispered arguments late at night. She heard her mother crying in the kitchen when she thought Maya was asleep. She saw the pile of unpaid medical bills on the counter, growing thicker every day. The insurance money they were counting on to fix the car and pay the hospital wasn't coming. The judgment had closed the door on that. One afternoon, about a week after the court date, Maya's father came into her room. He looked tired, his eyes rimmed with red. He was holding a small box. "Hey, honey," he said gently, sitting on the edge of her bed. "How are you feeling?" "I'm fine," Maya lied, turning away from him. He sighed. "You don't have to be fine. I know this is hard. It's hard for all of us." He paused, looking down at the box in his hands. "The insurance company called today. Since the case is dismissed and they aren't paying for the car, Well, we have to clear out the garage. We're going to have to sell it for scrap. Maya felt a lump form in her throat. Her car, the beat-up sedan she had worked so hard to buy with her summer earnings, was gone. It was just metal and glass now, destroyed and discarded. I just came to give you this, her father said. I took it out of the glove box before the tow truck came. He handed her the small box. It was a shoebox. Inside were all the small things she kept in her car: a hairbrush, some CDs, a spare charger, and a collection of sunglasses. At the bottom, she saw her phone mount and the tangled wires of her old dash cam. She picked up the dash cam. It was broken, the lens cracked. She remembered how angry she had been when she found out the video hadn't saved. It felt like a cruel joke from the universe. If only this little piece of plastic had done its job, she wouldn't be in this mess. She threw it back into the box with a burst of sudden anger. Take it, she said, her voice harsh. I don't want it. It's useless. Just like me. Her father looked hurt, but he didn't get mad. He just put the lid on the box and stood up. You aren't useless, Maya. We're going to get through this. It's just money. We'll figure it out. After he left, Maya lay back down, hugging a pillow to her chest. She felt more alone than she had ever felt in her entire life. She felt like she had been erased. Mr. Sterling was out there living his life, probably driving a new car, while she was stuck here, punished for something she didn't do. The injustice of it burned in her stomach like acid. She wanted to fight, but she didn't know how. The system had crushed her, and she was just a teenager. What could she possibly do against adults like him? She closed her eyes, letting the tears leak out and soak her pillow. She wished she could just wake up and find out it was all a bad dream. But the throbbing in her arm and the stack of bills downstairs told her it was painfully, horribly real. The story was over, and she had lost, or so she thought. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves of the big oak tree near the house, stirring something in the air, a faint signal that things were about to change. 2 days had passed since the courtroom defeat, and the heavy gray cloud hanging over the house seemed permanent. The initial shock had faded into a deep, aching sadness. Maya spent most of her time in her room, not wanting to face the world or the pitying looks of her neighbors. The financial reality was setting in, and the house was quiet. It's filled with the unspoken stress of bills that couldn't be paid. Outside, however, the weather had taken a turn. The rain had finally stopped, replaced by a bright, blinding sun that felt almost insulting. It was Saturday, and the noise of a buzzing drone interrupted the silence of Maya's room. It was her younger brother, Leo. He was only 10, and the drone was a birthday gift he had been obsessed with since he got it. Usually the buzzing noise annoyed Maya, but today, it was just another reminder that life was going on without her. She heard a crash and a loud "oh no" from the backyard. Maya sighed, rubbing her temples. She walked to the window and looked down. Leo was standing near the large oak tree that separated their property from the neighbor's yard, jumping up and trying to grab a branch. His drone was tangled high up in the leaves, out of reach. Knowing she couldn't just leave him there struggling, Maya grabbed her hoodie and slipped her feet into her shoes. She walked downstairs and out the back door. The cool air felt good against her skin, a small relief from the stuffy atmosphere inside the house. Need a hand? She called out. Leo turned around, looking guilty. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to crash it. It's stuck. Maya looked up at the tree. It was a massive old oak with branches that stretched over the fence. Go get the ladder, she said. I'll see if I can reach it. While Leo ran to the garage, Maya stood under the tree, looking at the spot where her car had been hit. From here, she could see the intersection down the street. It looked so peaceful now, just a normal crossroads with cars stopping and going politely. It was hard to believe that this quiet street was the place where her life had been turned upside down. She looked around the neighborhood while she waited. Her gaze landed on the house directly behind theirs, the one that backed up onto the intersection. It belonged to an elderly woman named Mrs. Gable. Maya didn't know her very well. She mostly kept to herself, usually seen gardening in the early mornings. Maya's eyes scanned the side of Mrs. Gable's house. and she froze. There, tucked under the eaves of the roof, pointed directly at the intersection, was a small, black camera lens. Maya's heart skipped a beat. She had walked past this house 1,000 times. She had lived in this neighborhood her whole life, but she had never noticed that camera before. The police had knocked on doors, hadn't they? They said they looked for witnesses, but maybe they missed this one. It was high up, almost hidden in the shadows of the gutter. She remembered Mr. Sterling's lawyer saying there was no video. No proof. The words echoed in her head. Leo came back with the ladder, dragging it across the grass. "Here," he huffed. Maya helped him set it up. Her mind was racing, distracting her from the task. She climbed up a few rungs, carefully reaching into the leaves with her good arm. She felt the plastic body of the drone and snagged it. Got it. She climbed down. She couldn't take her eyes off Mrs. Gable's house. It was a long shot. A massive, impossible long shot. It had been weeks since the accident. Surely the footage would be gone by now. But the thought gnawed at her. What if it wasn't? "Thanks, Maya," Leo said, hugging his recovered drone. "You're welcome," she said absently. "Hey, I'm going to go say hi to Mrs. Gable for a second, okay?" Leo shrugged and ran back to the patio to test his drone. Maya walked to the gate that separated their yard from Mrs. Gable's. She felt nervous, like she was about to do something scary. Her palms were sweating. She walked up the paved path to the front door and knocked. She waited a moment, then knocked again. After a long pause, the door opened. Mrs. Gable stood there. She was a short woman, with white hair and thick glasses. She looked surprised to see Maya. "Oh, hello, dear," she said kindly. "You're the girl from next door, aren't you?" "Maya, I heard about what happened. Such a terrible thing. How is your arm?" "It's getting better, thank you," Maya said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Mrs. Gable, this is going to sound strange, but I was looking at your house from the backyard and I saw a camera up there near the roof." Mrs. Gable followed her finger and squinted at the roof. "Oh, that old thing. My son put that up last year? I kept forgetting it was even there." Maya's breath hitched. "Does it record? Does it keep video?" "It's supposed to," Mrs. Gable said, adjusting her glasses. "It's one of those smart ones. It detects motion or loud noises or something. He set it up so I could see if anyone was stealing my packages, but honestly, I never check it. I don't really know how to work the computer thing it connects to." The mention of loud noises sent a jolt of electricity through Maya. The crash was definitely a loud noise. "You think?" Maya asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Do you think it might have recorded the night of my accident?" 2 weeks ago. On the rainy Tuesday? Mrs. Gable frowned, thinking, well, it's possible. Like I said, if there was a loud bang, it usually turns on. But dear, that was 2 weeks ago. It probably recorded over it by now. It only keeps so much space. The hope that had flared up in Maya's chest flickered and threatened to die out. "Is there any way to check? Please. It's just... The judge said it was my fault because there was no proof. But I know I didn't run the light. If there is even a tiny chance..." Mrs. Gable looked at Maya's face. She saw the desperation, the dark circles under her eyes, and the cast on her arm. She saw a young girl who had been through a nightmare. The old woman's expression softened. "Come on in then," she said, opening the door wider. "Let's see what this machine does. I've got some tea brewing too." Inside of Mrs. Gable's house smelled like lavender and old books. It was cozy and cluttered, full of knickknacks and photographs. Maya sat on a plush floral sofa while Mrs. Gable went to a small desk in the corner where a laptop sat. The screen was dusty. Mrs. Gable put on her reading glasses and sighed. "All right," she muttered, pecking at the keys slowly. "Let's see here. He told me the password is on a sticky note. Ah, here it is." Maya watched, her heart pounding so loud she was sure Mrs. Gable could hear it. Every second felt like an hour. The old woman clicked slowly, her mouth shaking slightly. "I'm opening the app," Mrs. Gable said. "It says, library. Okay, now it lists the dates." Maya leaned forward. "Can you go back 2 weeks?" "Let me just scroll down," the old woman murmured. "Here is yesterday." Here is the day before. Oh, look, it caught a raccoon on the porch the other night. Naughty little thing. She kept scrolling. Maya held her breath. They were getting closer to the date of the accident. Here we are, Mrs. Gable said, stopping. 2 weeks ago, Tuesday. It's mostly empty. That means nothing triggered the camera. Maya felt her stomach drop. She slumped back against the sofa. Nothing. Wait a minute, Mrs. Gable said, squinting at the screen. There is one file here. It's flagged high decibel. It says it was triggered at 8:14 p.m. Maya gasped. 8:14 p.m. That was the exact time. She remembered looking at the clock on the dashboard just before the crash. Can we play it? Maya asked, her voice barely a whisper. I think so, Mrs. Gable said. She moved the mouse cursor over the file and double-clicked. A video player popped up on the screen. The image was grainy and black and white, taken from a high angle looking down on the street. It was raining hard in the video, the rain glowing in the streetlights. They could see the intersection clearly. They watched in silence. At first it was just cars passing by. Then Maya's car appeared on the screen, driving carefully. Then the SUV. The crash happened, throwing the image into chaos as the camera shook from the force of the sound. But it wasn't the video that mattered most now. It was what the camera picked up after the crash. The audio was clear. It captured the moment Mr. Sterling got out of his car. Mrs. Gable turned the volume up. They could hear the rain and then Mr. Sterling's voice. He was on his phone. Yeah, I'm fine, he said, sounding annoyed. The car's messed up, though. Yeah, I blew the red light. I was looking at a message and just didn't see it. Totally my bad. But don't worry, it's a kid in a beat-up car. I'll just say she ran it. The judge always believes the adult over a teenager. I'll get out of this. Maya froze. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. He had admitted it. He had admitted he was lying, admitted it was his fault, and laughed about how he would fool the court. The arrogance of it was breathtaking. Mrs. Gable took off her glasses and looked at Maya, her eyes wide. Well, I'll be, she whispered. He certainly told a different story in court, didn't he? Maya felt tears pricking her eyes, but this time they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief and a burning fire of anger. He did, Maya said, her voice gaining strength. Mrs. Gable, can I get a copy of this? I have to show my lawyer. Right now. Mrs. Gable smiled, a determined look on her face. You bet you can, honey. Let's save this file, and then I'm making you a cup of tea. We have a lot to celebrate. Maya sat in Mrs. Gable's living room, her hand hovering over the laptop, afraid that if she touched it, the video might disappear like a dream. But it was real. The audio was clear as a bell. Mr. Sterling's voice, casual and arrogant, admitting he blew the red light and planning to lie about it. Was saved on the hard drive. Mrs. Gable fussed with a tea tray, placing a steaming cup in front of Maya. Here you go, dear. Sugar. Just a little, thank you, Maya, said her voice shaking. She took a sip, the warmth spreading through her, but her mind was already racing miles away. She couldn't sit here and drink tea. Mrs. Gable, can you email this to me? Or put it on a USB drive? I need to get this to my lawyer immediately. Of course, the old woman said, bustling back to the computer. I'm not very tech-savvy, but I think I have a blank drive somewhere in this drawer. It took 20 minutes of searching and fumbling with cords. But finally, Mrs. Gable handed Maya a small, silver USB drive. It's all on there. The video and the audio. You take that to the police, you hear? I will, Maya said, clutching the drive tight in her good hand. Thank you. You don't know what this means. Maya didn't wait for another sip of tea. She called her father from the sidewalk, her voice urgent. Dad, come get me. You need to take me to Mr. Henderson's office. Now. When her father pulled up, Maya jumped into the passenger seat and thrust the USB drive at him. Dad, listen to this. Just listen. She plugged it into the car's stereo system. As Mr. Sterling's voice filled the car admitting to the crime, her father went pale. He gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. He didn't say a word until the clip ended. Then he slammed his hand on the dashboard. "That snake," he whispered, his voice thick with anger. "That absolute snake. I knew it. I knew it." The drive to the lawyer's office felt like a race against time. Maya's heart was hammering against her ribs. This was it. The moment everything could change, they burst into Mr. Henderson's office without an appointment. The secretary looked surprised, but one look at Maya's frantic face and the determined look on her father's made her pick up the phone immediately. Mr. Henderson came out of his office, looking confused. He was holding a file, probably another case that actually paid well. "Maya? Mr. Rivera? What's going on?" "We found it," Maya said breathlessly. "We found the evidence." She handed him the USB drive. "It's a security camera from my neighbor's house. It has video of the crash, but more importantly, it has audio. He admits it. He admits he ran the light and that he was going to blame me." Mr. Henderson took the drive, his skepticism clear on his face. He had seen many people come in with proof that turned out to be nothing. He led them into his office and plugged the drive into his computer. They stood behind him as he watched. The small video player popped up. Mr. Henderson adjusted his glasses, watching the grainy footage of the intersection. Then he turned up the volume, as Mr. Sterling's voice played in the quiet office. Maya saw the change in Mr. Henderson. He went from skeptical to shocked. And then, slowly, a look of fierce determination settled on his face. He stopped the video and turned his chair around to face them. "Mr. Henderson said, his voice quiet but intense, is a game changer. This isn't just evidence. This is a confession. He lied to the court," Maya said, tears finally spilling over. "He made everyone think I was a liar. And he used that lie to win a judgment," Mr. Henderson said, standing up. "We can't just appeal. We have to move for a new judgment entirely based on this new evidence. Fraud upon the court. It's a serious accusation, but with this recording, it's open and shut." The legal wheels turned much faster this time. The fact that an adult, a wealthy, respected businessman had not only caused the accident, but had concocted a scheme to frame a teenager was a scandal waiting to happen. Mr. Henderson filed an emergency motion with the judge. He included a transcript of the audio and the video file. 2 days later, they were back in the same courtroom. It looked the same, smelled the same, but the feeling in the air was completely different. Maya sat at the table with her lawyer. Her parents were behind her, holding hands. This time, Mr. Sterling wasn't smiling. He wasn't laughing with his lawyer or sipping water. He looked stiff. His face was pale, and he kept adjusting his tie. He had seen the motion. He knew they had something, but he probably didn't know exactly what. He looked like a man who had just realized the ground beneath him was crumbling. The judge walked in. He looked tired, but as he sat down and looked at the new file in front of him, his eyes sharpened. He looked over his glasses at Mr. Sterling. "Counsel," the judge said to Mr. Sterling's lawyer, "are you aware of the new evidence submitted by the plaintiff?" "We are, Your Honor," the lawyer said, standing up. "We object to the late submission of this footage. It was not presented during the trial." "Overruled," the judge said immediately. His voice was stern. "The court has an interest in ensuring that justice is served. If there is evidence of fraud, it supersedes procedural rules. I have reviewed the video and the audio transcript." The room was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Everyone was holding their breath. Mr. Sterling was staring at his shoes, his face turning a shade of beet red. "The audio recording clearly captures your client admitting to running a red light," the judge continued, his voice rising with authority. "Furthermore, it captures him stating his intent to lie to authorities and the court, specifically relying on the plaintiff's age to dismiss her credibility." The judge looked directly at Mr. Sterling. "This is not just negligence. Mr. Sterling, this is a deliberate attempt to pervert the course of justice. You used this court to validate a lie. You caused an accident, injured a young woman, and then tried to ruin her reputation to save your own insurance premiums?" Mr. Sterling tried to speak. "Your Honor, that wasn't me. It could be anyone. The quality is poor." The judge slammed his hand on the desk. The sound made everyone jump. I heard your voice, Mr. Sterling, and I heard enough. The judgment dismissing the plaintiff's claim is hereby vacated. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Maya Rivera, on all counts. The relief that washed over Maya was so intense it made her lightheaded. She let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for 2 months. Her mother buried her face in her hands and wept, this time tears of joy. Her father put a hand on Maya's shoulder, squeezing it tight. And regarding the behavior of the defendant, the judge added, glaring at the now-sweating businessman, I will be referring this matter to the district attorney for potential perjury charges. You may have settled this civilly today, sir, but your troubles are far from over. Mr. Sterling collapsed into his chair. His lawyer packed up his briefcase in a hurry, looking angry at his client for putting him in this position. The rich businessman had lost everything: his reputation, his money, and now possibly his freedom. As they walked out of the courthouse that afternoon, the sun was shining brightly. It felt warmer than before. Maya walked with her head high. The rumors in town would stop. The people who whispered about her being a liar would hear the truth. Mr. Sterling wouldn't be able to hide behind his suit and his money anymore. They stopped on the steps of the courthouse. Maya looked down at her cast. It was still there, and her arm still hurt a little. The financial settlement would pay for her medical bills and her car. But it didn't erase the nightmare of the crash, or the fear she had felt in that courtroom. But as she looked at her parents, who were smiling for the first time in weeks, she realized something important. She had stood up to the giant. She had been knocked down, called a liar, and dismissed by the system. But she hadn't given up. She had kept looking, kept fighting, even when it seemed hopeless. I'm proud of you, Maya, her father said, wrapping her in a hug. You never gave up. Thanks, Dad, she said, smiling. And thanks to Mrs. Gable and her raccoon camera. They laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind that breaks tension and heals the soul. The battle was over. The truth had won. Maya was just a teenager, but today she felt stronger than any businessman in town. She turned and walked down the steps, ready to get back to her life, knowing that no matter how dark things get, the truth has a way of coming out, usually when you least expect it.